Chapter 10 of Pellucidar. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ralph Snelson. Pellucidar by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Chapter 10. The Raid on the Cave Prison. His head was turned over his shoulder as I first saw him. He was looking back toward the village. As I leaped for him, his eyes fell upon me. Never in my life have I seen a more surprised mortal than this poor caveman. Before he could utter a single scream of warning or alarm, I had my fingers on his throat and had dragged him behind the boulder, where I proceeded to sit upon him while I figured out what I had best do with him. He struggled a little at first, but finally lay still, and so I released the pressure of my fingers at his windpipe, for which I imagine he was quite thankful. I know that I should have been. I hated to kill him in cold blood, but what else I was to do with him I could not see, for to turn him loose would have been merely to have the entire village aroused and down upon me in a moment. The fellow lay looking up at me with the surprise still deeply written on his countenance. At last, all of a sudden, a look of recognition entered his eyes. "I have seen you before," he said. "I saw you in the arena at the Mahars city of Phutra, when the Thipdars dragged the Taurug from you and your mate. I never understood that. Afterward they put me in the arena with two warriors from Gombol." He smiled in recollection. "It would have been the same had there been 10 warriors from Gombol. I slew them, winning my freedom. Look." He half turned his left shoulder toward me, exhibiting the newly healed scar of the Mahars' branded mark. "Then," he continued, "as I was returning to my people, I met some of them fleeing. They told me that one called Hooja, the Sly One, had come and seized our village, putting our people into slavery. So I hurried hither to learn the truth, and sure enough, here I found Hooja and his wicked men living in my village, and my father's people but slaves among them. I was discovered and captured, but Hooja did not kill me. I am the chief's son, and through me he hoped to win my father's warriors back to the village to help him in a great war he says that he will soon commence. Among his prisoners is Dian, the beautiful one, whose brother, Dakor, the strong one, chief of Amoz, once saved my life when he came to Thuria to steal a mate. I helped him capture her, and we are good friends. So when I learned that Dian, the beautiful one, was Hooja's prisoner, I told him that I would not aid him if he harmed her. Recently one of Hooja's warriors overheard me talking with another prisoner. We were planning to combine all the prisoners, seize weapons, and when most of Hooja's warriors were away, slay the rest and retake our hilltop. Had we done so, we could have held it, for there are only 2 entrances, the narrow tunnel at one end and the steep path up the cliffs at the other. But when Hooja heard what we had planned, he was very angry and ordered that I die. They bound me hand and foot and placed me in a cave until all the warriors should return to witness my death. But while they were away, I heard someone calling me in a muffled voice, which seemed to come from the wall of the cave. When I replied, the voice, which was a woman's, told me that she had overheard all that had passed between me and those who had brought me thither, and that she was Dakor's sister and would find a way to help me. Presently a little hole appeared in the wall at the point from which the voice had come. After a time I saw a woman's hand digging with a bit of stone. Dakor's sister made a hole in the wall between the cave where I lay bound and that in which she had been confined, and soon she was by my side and had cut my bonds. We talked then, and I offered to make the attempt to take her away and back to the land of Sari, where she told me she would be able to learn the whereabouts of her mate. Just now I was going to the other end of the island to see if a boat lay there and if the way was clear for our escape. Most of the boats are always away now, for a great many of Hooja's men and nearly all the slaves are upon the island of trees, where Hooja is having many boats built to carry his warriors across the water to the mouth of the great river which he discovered while he was returning from Phutra, a vast river that empties into the sea there. The speaker pointed toward the northeast. "It is wide and smooth and slow running almost to the land of Sari," he added. "And where is Diane the Beautiful One now?" I asked. I had released my prisoner as soon as I found that he was Hooja's enemy, and now the pair of us were squatting beside the boulder while he told his story. "She returned to the cave where she had been imprisoned," he replied, "and is awaiting me there." "There is no danger that Hooja will come while you are away?" "Hooja is upon the island of trees," he replied. "Can you direct me to the cave so that I can find it alone?" I asked. He said he could, and in the strange yet explicit fashion of the Pellucidarians, he explained minutely how I might reach the cave where he had been imprisoned, and through the hole in its wall reach Diane. I thought it best for but one of us to return, since two could accomplish but little more than one and would double the risk of discovery. In the meantime he could make his way to the sea and guard the boat, which I told him lay there at the foot of the cliff. I told him to await us at the cliff top, and if Diane came alone, to do his best to get away with her and take her to Sari, as I thought it quite possible that in case of detection and pursuit it might be necessary for me to hold off Hooja's people while Diane made her way alone to where my new friend was to await her. I impressed upon him the fact that he might have to resort to trickery or even to force to get Diane to leave me, but I made him a promise that he would sacrifice everything, even his life, in an attempt to rescue Dakor's sister. Then we parted, he to take up his position where he could watch the boat and await Diane, I to crawl cautiously on toward the caves. I had no difficulty in following the directions given me by Juag, the name by which Dakor's friend said he was called. There was the leaning tree, my first point he told me to look for after rounding the boulder where we had met. After that I crawled to the balanced rock, a huge boulder resting upon a tiny base no larger than the palm of your hand. From here I had my first view of the village of caves. A low bluff ran diagonally across one end of the mesa, and in the face of this bluff were the mouths of many caves. Zigzag trails led up to them, and narrow ledges scooped from the face of the soft rock connected those upon the same level. The cave in which Juag had been confined was at the extreme end of the cliff nearest me. By taking advantage of the bluff itself, I could approach within a few feet of the aperture without being visible from any other cave. There were few people about at the time. Most of these were congregated at the foot of the far end of the bluff, where they were so engrossed in excited conversation that I felt but little fear of detection. However, I exercised the greatest care in approaching the cliff. After watching for a while until I caught an instant when every head was turned away from me, I darted rabbit-like into the cave. Like many of the man-made caves of Pellucidar, this one consisted of 3 chambers, one behind another, and all unlit except for what sunlight filtered in through the external opening. The result was gradually increasing darkness as one passed into each succeeding chamber. In the last of the 3 I could just distinguish objects, and that was all. As I was groping around the walls for the hole that should lead into the cave where Diane was imprisoned, I heard a man's voice quite close to me. The speaker had evidently but just entered, for he spoke in a loud tone, demanding the whereabouts of one whom he had come in search of. "Where are you, woman?" he cried. "Hooja has sent for you." And then a woman's voice answered him. "And what does Hooja want of me?" The voice was Diane's. I groped in the direction of the sounds, feeling for the hole. "He wishes you brought to the island of trees," replied the man, "for he is ready to take you as his mate." "I will not go," said Diane. "I will die first." "I am sent to bring you, and bring you I shall." I could hear him crossing the cave toward her. Frantically I clawed the wall of the cave in which I was in an effort to find the elusive aperture that would lead me to Diane.